On in. It's a football Friday here on Birds 365 with Mac and Mac, John McMullen and Jody McDonald. JM, there's a bunch of narratives that lead into this weekend's game against the Giants, some of which we're just projecting because you never know what's going to happen when you play a football game, and some of which we don't know because we don't even know who's going to be on the field playing that football game just yet. For both teams, the Giants and the Eagles, I know you had a busy day down at the NovaCare complex yesterday for a chance to get an actual look at some practice and talk to some key Eagle coaches. What was the biggest thing you learned yesterday?
Biggest thing I learned yesterday: the Eagles are sticking to competitive advantage like a dog with a bone. Obviously it starts with Jalen Hurts if he's going to play, and I think he is going to play. But man, they are trying to try to keep that under lockdown for as long as humanly possible. And the ironic thing about that, Jody, is the Giants don't give a, what, they don't care. They don't, they're trying to get to the playoffs. They're trying to get out of this thing with as many healthy players as possible. Not, I'm sure they'd love to pull off an upset with the backups and all that, playing the majority of the game. But, it's funny because we asked both Shane Steich and Jonathan Gannon about, preparing for a team that you don't know who's going to play. Well, they do know who's going to play, but is it Leonard Williams or whomever the backup is? And they say the same thing. It's about, we prepare for the starters. We prepare for the starters. We prepare for the starters, which they should. And if they're prepared for the starters, they're prepared for the backups, who by definition are not as good as the starters. I don't know why the Eagles can't recognize that. On the flip side, you prepare for the starter, whether that's Lane Johnson. If you prepare for Lane Johnson, you're prepared for Jack Driscoll. If you prepare for Jalen Hurts, you're prepared for Gardner Minshew. It's really gotten to the point of absurdity.
Well, I guess I'll disagree slightly, specifically at the quarterback position. If you're preparing for Lane Johnson, you're preparing for Jack Driscoll. On that, we will agree. As a matter of fact, you might not even have to prepare as much. The level of talent of the player is certainly something you should be able to adjust to. Jalen Hurts is just a different player than Gardner Minshew. At a key position, he's going to play it better and differently than Gardner Minshew. If you're talking about a key spot like quarterback, and Jalen being such a unique quarterback, I would tell you on the Giants side, there's a difference between preparing for one or preparing for the other. If you knew for a fact it was going to be one or going to be the other. But in most of the position, generally your statement is on point and accurate. Yeah, you're preparing for the Philadelphia Eagles. You're not preparing for the Jack Driscoll-led Philadelphia Eagles if you're the Giants, and the same thing. Teddy Bridgewater. Tyrod Taylor's a little different than Daniel Jones. But, Matt Breida, are you going to prepare differently because Matt Breida's going to take the handoffs instead of Saquon Barkley? Not really. So I get the point you're saying, but I think quarterback is a different animal, just the way quarterback is on every single game. A different animal has that big an impact on the game. And there are reports out of New York, not confirmed by the Giants by any stretch of the imagination, but there are reports that the belief is in some corners that Daniel Jones isn't even going to play, that the Giants may full well go to a preseason type mode, get starters out there, get them a little run and get them off the field, get them protected. That might not be the case at quarterback. So are you buying what the Eagles are selling, that they're preparing the same exact way for Daniel Jones that they would be if they knew it was Tyrod Taylor being quarterback?
Yeah, the exact same way. Same way. And the thing is, I hear your point, Jody. If it were a different style, like you've seen the Eagles play, they play the same offense with Gardner Minshew. They just don't play it as effectively because he doesn't have as much skill or ability.
How many designated runs did they have for Gardner Minshew over the last 2 weeks?
But the misunderstanding is the zone read. Jalen's gonna pull it, and Jalen's gonna create this danger of when he's healthy, this danger to the defense that Gardner can't present. But they're running the same offense. It's just
Right.
not.
So if you're the Giants defense, you would prepare differently
Why
for
would-
a quarterback who's going to run a zone read offense, who is going to keep the ball 4% of the time as compared to a quarterback who's going to keep it 55% of the time.
No, because you prepare for a zone read like you prepare for a zone read. You scrape over the top if you're a linebacker. It doesn't matter if Jody Mack is doing it or Lamar Jackson. You do the same thing. There's only so much you can do. You got to fill the gap as best way possible. The problem is the personnel on the other side. If it's Jody Mack versus Lamar Jackson, you're going to have a lot more fears of defense. You're going to have a lot more problems. Now, if you're telling me Mike Glennon's back there and a pure pocket passer versus Jalen Hurts, or Mike Glennon versus Daniel Jones, who's also got some mobility, but so does Tyrod Taylor. No. First of all, the Eagles play their defense. We've talked about this 100 million times. They're going to play the same defense, which is one of my problems with the defense. And for anybody who listens, and I learned on Twitter again, there's a lot of people that don't listen. I don't even like this scheme. And I've said it since day one. Too many people run the scheme, so then it becomes who does it best. Well, guess what? The Eagles have done it best. They've done it best of all the teams that run this stupid scheme. So I do give them credit for that. I give them a ton of credit for that. But number one, they're going to run them what they run anyway. And that's what frustrates me about the Eagles, because they do it on both sides of the football, and they act like this competitive advantage. Now, granted, this is more personal than anything else. It's not a big deal. It's just a little bit frustrating when they play these games because they know how they run their operation, and they don't change. And it's about them. And both coordinators said it yesterday. It's about us. It's about us. It's about what we do. All right. Well, then it's about what the Giants do. And guess what? They don't care about winning the game. Number one. Number two, they're going to try to get to the playoffs as healthy as possible because they can't move. So no, they're not preparing differently and saying, oh, I wonder. Wink Martindale's not sitting there and going, oh, I wonder if it's going to be Jalen Hurts or Gardner Minshew. He's preparing for Jalen Hurts. If it wasn't going to be Jalen Hurts, if he's prepared for Jalen Hurts and he's taught his players correctly, well, then he's freaking prepared for Gardner Minshew.
Yeah, you and I are just going to disagree on this. Gardner Minshew isn't Jalen Hurts, and Jalen Hurts isn't Gardner Minshew. And if I were a defensive player, if I was the middle linebacker of the New York Giants, and on any given RPO that the Eagles should run, I'm going to, even if it's that split-second decision on which way you're going to lean on a play, that you believe it's going to go to the running back, you believe it's going to go to the quarterback, I'm certainly going to lean more that Gardner Minshew is going to hand off the football.
But that's not preparation, Jody. That's instinct. That's instinct from the personnel.
No,
you're right.
Well, instinct and mental preparation. I'll describe it again if you need. On a given play, as you're prepping for the week, as you're sitting here on a Friday getting ready and you're going through your mental preparation for the week, and you believe the Eagles are going to run X amount of RPOs. Well, on those plays, I'm leaning. I'm believing. I'm not overreacting, but I'm certainly going to lean one way or the other. And I would lean more toward playing it straight up. I can't afford to let Jalen Hurts, if he pulls that ball back, take off and make a big play. I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to lean inside, and I'm going to believe he's going to hand the ball off most of the time if it's Gardner Minshew. That's mental preparation.
I always say everything's about definitions, right? I already said that. They have no fear. That's the problem with Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson. There's fear there. There's fear. You saw it way back when all this first started. I always point to the Clay Matthews, Colin Kaepernick game. Clay Matthews was one of the best players in the NFL, best defensive players in the NFL at that point in the playoffs. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know what to do with Colin Kaepernick playing. Now, they were one of the first teams before it turned into a splash, and now everybody runs zone read, and teams have gotten better at it. So, but there's a fear with people who can do it. And you're not going to have that fear with Gardner Minshew. You're not going to have that fear. But my point is, when you're running a zone read, it doesn't matter if it's Jalen Hurts or Gardner Minshew or Lamar Jackson or anybody else. You teach the same stinking thing. You teach the linebacker to scrape over the top to where, and yes, the linebacker on the field, whether it's Jalen Smith or who's not going to play, evidently, yeah, he's going to have the instincts. If they're a smart player, TJ Edwards probably a better example because he's a very smart player.
Agreed.
He has those instincts. He knows Lamar Jackson's on the other side, and he knows somebody who's not feared is on the other side, but he's taught the same thing. He's taught the same thing when it comes to zone read, but he knows instinctually, all right, I don't have to fear this guy as much.
I'll give you one more example, and I promise we'll move on. A basketball example. You're taught to stay between your man and the basket defensively. When your guy's got the basketball, you're facing him straight up. He's going to potentially drive on you. You're supposed to stay dead center between he and the basket. If you've got a guy that you know ahead of time, goes to the right, uses his right-hand dribble about 85% of the time, well, of course you're going to cheat that way. You're starting with the belief, I must stay between he and the basket. But if you know that he's going to do something a greater majority of the time than someone else, they sub out, they bring in a guy, he goes left and right the same amount. Well, then you've got to play him differently. You prep the same way, stay between he and the basket, but you adjust in your own mind that you know a guy is more likely to do something one way or the other. That's what I mean by preparing differently. And I used to do it as a player. I never played high-level competitive football, but I did basketball.
Yeah,
and you play different guys differently.
I'm not arguing instincts. Marshawn Lattimore beat the Eagles because he's a savvy, instinctual player. And he saw a play in the first half, and he got caught on it. And he saw the Eagles were going to run it again at the biggest moment of the game. He called out the play. He knew what was coming. The quarterback didn't recognize it. Bang, pick six. That had nothing to do with coaching. That had to do with the player's instinct. And you know, in a lot of ways, look, when we talk about major sports, if you talk about all sports on your many radio shows and things like that, football is by far the most important sport when it comes to coaching and scheming of the major sports, at least in my opinion. That said, people put way too much into coaching and scheming over personnel. It's still about the players, like every other sport. You're talking about instincts in basketball. Basketball is probably the most leaning towards the other side, where it's, you know, completely about the player and his instincts. And, you know, whether it's Larry Bird or Michael Jordan or any great player you want to talk about, you know, you can teach all you want, but they're gonna do what they're gonna do. Same thing in football, man. And Marcus Lattimore is a perfect example of that. Nobody's in his ear saying, oh, the Eagles are going to run that. No, he saw 4-by-1. He saw it in the first half. He got inside levers. Gardner Minshew didn't pick up on it. Bang, game over. Same thing with this.
But here's the one thing we don't know, if you want to use the Lattimore thing as an example. Do we know that his coaches didn't tell him, listen, Minshew throws a weaker slant pass than Jalen Hurts. He doesn't have the kind of zip on his ball. So if you read it, if you see it, feel free to go ahead and try and jump a quick slant against Gardner Minshew instead of Jalen Hurts. We have no idea whether the defensive coordinator said that to Marshawn Lattimore.
Well, he didn't do it in the first half. You're right. I mean, there's no way I can prove it, but, you know, AJ Brown says it on the record. You know, he was calling out the play. He knew what play we were running. Now, is that about prep beforehand? Sure, he's a very smart player. There's savvy players, and I say it all the time about Bradbury, specifically on this team. Just a tremendously smart player. TJ Edwards. Yeah, those guys deserve all the credit. And if you go to a different linebacker or a different cornerback, and you've seen it with the Eagles over the years, specifically at corner, you know, there's a big difference from guys who know how to play and guys who don't know how to play, especially in this scheme. which there's so many blown coverages in this scheme, less in Philadelphia than with the dozen other teams that run this scheme. There's blown coverages all over the place because it's about communication. So, from that aspect, yeah. But I'm talking about from the, and we use the zone read. You teach the same damn thing. I mean, the players know what to do. Did they execute it? The +1 in the running game is something you can't account for. That's why it's so successful. That's why it's called +1. You do it, but that's about the physical gifts. That's about the Michael Jordan gifts. Some guys have it, some guys don't have it. That's what that's about. Because everybody's taught the same thing when it comes to the zone read. Linebacker, scrape over the top. You don't have to fear Gardner Minshew. You have to fear Jalen Hurts.
Right. So I think that while the basic way that you design a defense against that type of a play will be the same on all plays, it's up to the player to mentally have a better read before the players ever run on how they're going to go, which I do look at as preparation. Mental preparation might not be changing the drive. We're going to play it this way against Gardner, and we're going to give you a completely different responsibility. No, mental preparation in that millisecond of decision that a defensive player is going to make. I think he does it differently against a guy like Gardner Minshew than Jalen Hurts. And we still don't know if Jalen Hurts is going to start. We probably won't know till Sunday because the Eagles love that competitive advantage. All right, we get a competitive advantage when we get to punch up our next guest from Bleeding Green Nation. Brandon Lee Gouton's going to join us here on Birds 365.